I want to talk a little bit about the history of the internet and the history of the World Wide Web, but I'm going to tell you from my point of view, because there's going to be some interesting stories in here. It's not going to be that long. So I started using the internet maybe in 1989 or 88 or 87. There was a place called Quantum Link, which became AOL. And I don't think it was linked to the internet at the time, but there was another service. It was called like BitServe or something like that, which I believe was connected to the internet, but there was no graphical interface. You had to type text only, and all the features, like if you were playing a game, it would be a text-only game. And I used to use bulletin boards, which you would use a modem and you would call a phone number and would access another computer, and usually one person could do it at a time unless they had multiple boards. And I actually ran my own. And most of them were PC-based or another computer. Some of them were Unix-based, which mean it would be over the internet. And you could actually send emails to people on other bulletin boards and on over the internet. It was called UUCP. And it had like a Unix, a modern internet-style feel, no graphics, but it was text only. But it wasn't like text on your PC. It was internet before the web came along. So I started using the internet directly, I think in 1990 when I went to my university. And my university was one of the universities that had web developers, or that developed part of the web. CERN was one of them. There was a Champaign-Urbana was another one. There were only a couple. And I knew this guy, I believe his name was Mike, and it was 1991 or 1992, 1993, and he came up to me and says, "Dave, have you heard about the web?" I said, "No." He said, "Oh, you should come by my office sometime and see it." And I asked him, "What's the web?" And he says, "It's like Gopher with graphics." And if someone goes up to you and says it's like Gopher with graphics, you're going to say, "I don't care." Because Gopher was a file retrieval service where you log into a service and you type in a search word and it finds the documents, and then you can read the documents, and that was it. And I was like, who cares? I mean, those documents are going to be journals, medical journals, and things like that. It's nothing interesting. It wasn't used for entertainment, for example. Then a year later, I bumped into him again. And he must have been a grad student. And he said the same thing, "Have you seen the web?" I said, "No." He said, "Stop by my office sometime." And I didn't. So then 1994 came around. It was November, I think. And I was living with a friend of mine from a different school. I think he may have finished his school already or around that time. I'm really not sure. And he had an account with one of those bulletin boards, but it was an ISP so they had internet connection with the graphical web interface. And I was looking on his computer and I saw it for the first time, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. And it was the first time I had ever seen a web page. And back then, websites only had one page. So any website you would go to, Yahoo was only one page, and that's it. So you would just see the home page. And if you search around, maybe you can see the design. It was always a gray background. There would be a paragraph and then a line going across, and then a paragraph and a line going across and a paragraph. And it would go on for what we would call a couple pages. You know, it would scroll down. And there would be links in blue where you could link to something else. And I had an ebook that I had written, and I made my first website. I took my ebook and I converted it to HTML, put it on my homepage account, and I made it an online thing that you could go read. But there was no advertising or making money or any of that. So then the other thing is domain names were free. You could go say, "I want this domain name," and get it. I got lots of domain names for free. Most of them were computer related, like about Macintosh computers or OS/2, etc. And like I said, Yahoo, when I first looked at it, was one page, and it said, "Here's a list of all the websites in the world." And there were about 100, and that was it. And that was all the known websites. And of course, I had created my own, which wasn't on the list. But it was, the big one was like Champaign-Urbana, CERN was a big one. And I think Champaign-Urbana may have had a page that was extremely popular, where everybody would go every day. Here's all the new websites that were coming up. And every day we saw all these new websites. And I'm going to tell you an example. There was one that my friend had done. Oh, no, wait, I don't think my friend did it, but another, like a friend of his who maybe I knew, where you could go to his webpage and type on the computer, and his computer would speak, and it would have a video feed of his cat, and it was "Talk to my cat" or something like that. And because the Commodore Amiga had a feature where you could type and it could speak. And if you look at it, I believe it was Time Magazine around 93 or 94, they did the first article about the internet. He was in that article, so his name is in there. And it might mention about "Talk to my cat" or something like that. Like I said, I don't remember his name. I think it was Michael. So the internet started growing, and I got a job doing website development. I did Sprint PCS. I did the first web page for the Wall Street Journal. I wasn't the only designer. There were other people that did it. I was the one who finished the job and got it online and coded everything. I did, like, if you want to click on a link, other people did the part that you read the words and the graphics. I did all the software, the programming part to the final step. Sprint PCS was a big one. I was in charge of the Sprint PCS website. I had access to the entirety of the code, and I could delete the site if I wanted to. So I did other sites, but I really don't remember. I remember Wall Street Journal. I remember Sprint PCS. It's really hard to remember any other clients that I had. So there was no advertising. And then Wired.com became a website, and it was a cool website. And companies like NBC and CNN, they didn't have websites. Or you would go there and it would be just a web page that said, "Coming in the future, CNN," and it would say nothing else. That's what a lot of businesses did if they even were online. So Wired became a popular site, and you could go and read articles that were all cool, and it was all about technology. And what they did one day is they put an ad at the top of the page, and it was a little game that you could play, a little ping pong game that you could play. Pong is what it was. And you could play Pong in the ad, and you click on the ad, and maybe it was an ad for IBM or something like that. And they were the first ones to do an ad. And eventually advertising started to appear on the internet, on the web, and people hated it. Everybody was, and what you would do is, like, when there was an ad, you would scroll the page just to scroll the ad, even if it didn't animate. And then when animated ads came along, everybody hated animated ads. And this was long before pop-ups. People hated animated ads, and you would cover it with your hand or whatever, because it would distract you when you're trying to read something. But we eventually got used to it. So a lot of big companies had no website. And when I moved to South America 10 years ago, there were still large numbers of big companies that had no website. So the US started to have more and more websites. And then they changed the policy with domain names. I don't know if it was 96, 97, somewhere around there, you had to start paying for domain names. So they started to have a financial value. And then you had to pay every year. So I started to have to pay for the domain names that I had. Eventually, large companies like NBC started having websites. They were awful at first. And then we had a problem where they couldn't handle the capacity. So I'm going to give you an example, September 11th. On September 11th, I was in a meeting. It was like 8:30 in the morning. I was in Manhattan, and our boss received a phone call during the meeting. And he said, "Oh, a plane flew into the World Trade Center." And that was important to us in New York. If something happened at the World Trade Center, and so people are going to tell other people because we're in the city, it was big news. And then like 15 minutes later, his phone rang again, and he said another plane flew into the World Trade Center. And then he said something like it's a terrorist attack, and then he canceled the meeting. We all ran back to our computers, our desks, and we could not access any website that was news-related, like CNN or CBS or whatever. The list goes on. So nobody knew what was going on. And, you know, I'm a smart guy. I'm not stupid. So I knew look for an international website. And I went to the BBC, and I was absolutely correct. The BBC site was up. So, and they had the news already. So I told everybody, get on the BBC website, go to BBC and you'll see the news. And then we discovered that there was some sort of terrorist attack going on. And it had to have been, we're talking about between 9 o'clock and 9:30. Our boss said, okay, the work is canceled today. Everybody go home. So I started walking home because the subways were not running and there was no public transportation. Oh, I guess this is no longer about the internet. So I'll move on to other stories about the internet. Okay, so another interesting thing. This happened back in the early 1990s. People would use originally the internet to talk about science. And then there was a wave of computer programmers, which was my generation. So when I was on the internet, I knew that there were old documents, people talking about science, but everybody that I knew or met on the internet was a computer programmer. We were all computer programmers, and it was like 99% men. It was rare that you would find a woman on the internet. And everything on the internet was computer related. It was one computer topic after another. And we saw how the web changed. And we saw, oh, look, here's something about sports, or here's something about books, or the list goes on, or here's something about women, you know. There's always going to be a section like women and computers, and that was it. That was a woman's forum or women's discussion area, is going to be women and using computers. So there was this incident that happened because there was a lot of piracy, software piracy, where it wasn't about video games or software so much, it was about music and photos, copyrighted photos. And there was people talking about pornography. And I looked at some photos. I didn't care about, I downloaded music, but it wasn't pirated music. It was, I don't know, how do you call it? It wasn't MP3, it was a different format. And it was music, computer-generated music. Like in Europe, they have, it's not called a rave, it's something else, where they have contests where 100 musicians would go, they bring their computers, and at the start, they have to create a song, and at the end, they show who has the best song, and that would be the type of music that I would listen to, and some of it was amazing. However, and then the photos, there were all sorts of crazy photos. Like someone would go out and take a picture of a car, and we'd be looking at, wow, picture of a car. That's amazing. Oh, look, here's a picture of a horse. You know, because we were all amazed at all these different photos that we got to see. And it was just boring stuff. So this was before Instagram. You know, this was our Instagram. And music, pirated music, commercial music. Okay, we should talk about photos first. There were copyrighted photos. It would usually be Playboy stuff, and there was a lot of talk about copyrighted photos being on the internet. But I never really came across that many because I didn't have any interest. And pornography, I never came across any on the internet because I didn't care. And then there was music, and I never downloaded it, but there was discussion, and there was a news report that was on TV. This was the early 90s. The RIAA, the Recording Artists of America, and they were demanding that the internet be shut down because they claimed that the sole purpose of the internet was to pirate copyrighted music. And this was in the news for a long time, and they wanted to sue. They may have actually filed a lawsuit. They wanted to sue. Well, like, who are you going to sue? You can't sue the internet. But they wanted the internet to be shut down. They were calling for it to be shut down. And if they had their way, there would have been no internet. And we're not talking about the web. We're talking about before the web. I remember they were talking about internet only, and I don't think the web existed at the time. So they're not talking about Napster. They're talking about people uploading files to an FTP server that was music, and there was no graphical interface whatsoever. One thing that was interesting is I had used bulletin boards, and I had this idea. This was before the web. And I said, how about The thing that I didn't like about the bulletin boards is you could read emails and you could go to the forum and read messages, and they had some text-based games which were very simplistic, like guess a number from 1 to 10, things like that. And they had files you could download, and most of them had only legal files, shareware. If you wanted something that was illegal, you had to go to a pirate bulletin board. And I had this idea. I said, wouldn't it be great if you could download a file and view a picture at the same time? Because to view a picture, you had to wait. It could take an hour to download a picture. And I had this great idea. You had to download the picture and then open the file on your computer to view it. I said, I had this great idea. Imagine if you could view the picture while it was downloading. And I knew the technology was possible. And I started writing a program, and I think I completed it, where you could view a picture while it was in the process of downloading. So that was the idea that I had. And I said, downloading a file and checking your email and writing in the forum. I had this great idea, and I started programming it. I said, okay, how am I going to do this? And I would stare at my desktop. And I said, wow. Then I had this second idea: integrate it with the desktop. Make a window for email, and then make another window that would show you the photo you want to download, and another window for the forum, and then it would be another window for files. So I had 4 features that I was going to do for my bulletin board software. And I started working on this, and I was making progress, and I probably had something that was kind of coming along, and then I saw the web, and when I saw the web, I said, my work is a waste of time, and I stopped working on it. So I actually had an idea that actually ended up being the exact same thing as what the web became. But the web did it with one browser. Mine was a separate window. Like, there was no one that could be email and files and photos. Mine was all going to be separate windows and limited to 4. Okay, so is there anything interesting about the history of the internet? I'm going to have to say that pretty much rounds it out. Unique things that were of... Okay, so I guess another thing is, when I went to South America 10 years ago, 2009, in Peru, nobody had emails, and people didn't own computers. And in the United States, everybody owned a laptop. And people in Colombia, many people did have internet service, but it was so slow, pathetically slow, and it's kind of slow today too. Like over here, to have 8 megabytes download is really fast. It's the fastest you're going to get. But most people are going to pay for 4 megabytes or 2 megabytes. Actually, you can get 20, but almost everybody gets 8. And uploading is dog slow. And just because you got 8 megabytes coming down, it's so slow. And the ping times are horrible. I get 250 millisecond, 300 millisecond ping times, when in the US you get 20 milliseconds or less. I've had 10. So a lot of people didn't use email. Internet was slow. In the U.S., if you want to look up a law, it's all on the internet. In the rest of the world, it's not like that. In Colombia, if you want to look up a law, it's not searchable, or there might be one page that has everything written, nothing to click on, and you got to read through everything, and you got to use the browser search. It's very different in the rest of the world. The U.S. is far ahead of everybody else in terms of internet development, and everyone else is so far behind that it'll be a long time before they catch up. Okay, so I guess that's about it. If you have any questions or comments, post below.